Hello art beaders, Becky here with artbeads.com, and we've got a brand new video for you today. Today I'm going to be showing you how to create a brick stitch focal on a frame. I'm going to be using a really beautiful focal pendant from TierraCast's Wild Wild West collection and some really fun gemstone beads to create this brick stitch design. So let's dive in and see just how wonderfully you can enhance your pieces with a little bit of brick stitch flair. For this video, I'm going to be showing you how to make our saguaro sunrise necklace. It's got this beautiful TierraCast pendant with a brick stitch, a beaded brick stitch focal stitched on to the bottom and the top for attaching the bail. So I'm going to be showing you how to add that brick stitch flair to this beautiful TierraCast piece. You're going to need a pendant like this one. This one has an open design on the bottom, making it easy to stitch your brick stitch piece onto the bottom there. You'll need some beads to work with. I used some Dakota stones, Hubei turquoise gemstones, and some of our prestige crystal for this piece. For today, I'm going to be using some 8/0 round Toho seed beads and some more of that beautiful turquoise. You'll also need a needle, a beading needle, and thread. I have got a size 12 beading needle here and some KO thread in a color that matches the beads that I'm using pretty well. Just a note, if you're planning on using crystal in your brick stitch, I would recommend using a thread like Fireline because that is a strong thread that's not going to end up getting cut by the crystal. So just keep that in mind. So I've added thread to my needle. I cut about an arm span length of thread to work with, and I am going to begin by tying the end of my thread to the bottom side of this pendant. And I'm going to leave a tail long enough to weave back into my completed brick stitch piece, just so I have a nice clean finish there. So this tail will get woven into the beads you're adding to kind of hide it. Now that my thread is knotted to the bottom of this focal, I'm going to pick up 2 of my 8/0 round beads. I'm going to start with the seed beads for my brick stitch technique. So you pick up 2 of these, then you're going to bring that needle through the center of the bottom of this drop and go back up through the second seed bead you added. You can see that that's kind of getting the first row of beads started on your frame. To continue that row of beads, you're going to pick up 1 seed bead, slide it down, and then bring your thread back through the center of that focal and then back up through the bead you just added. And you just continue doing that. And I'm going to add 6 beads to this row. So add another bead, slide it down, come up through the center of that drop, go back up through the bead, and make sure to pull tight so that all of these beads are lining up nicely. And you can kind of adjust on the frame as you go. Adding another bead, sliding it down, coming up through the center of that, and back up through the bead. Just got to add 1 more bead. Okay, I've got 6 seed beads on the first row of my brick stitch, and now it's time to start adding the second row. I'm going to make an increasing row for this next row with another row of seed beads. So to make a brick stitch row on an increase, you're going to pick up 2 seed beads, and then you'll see these little thread bridges between the beads in your first row. So what you're going to do is you're going to pass your needle under that first thread bridge there. And then you're going to come up through that second seed bead that you just added, making sure that you don't go back through that thread bridge because that'll just undo your work. There you go. So you've started the row on an increase. So you can see this bead here kind of overlaps that last bead. If we had started the row on a decrease, we would have brought our thread through that second thread bridge, and this bead would not be hanging over, but it would instead be to the inside of the last row. I'm going to continue this row, and I'm going to end it on an increase as well. So to continue the row, you're just going to pick up 1 seed bead, bring your needle under that next thread bridge over, pull, 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 and go back up through the bead you just added. Again, making sure not to go through that thread bridge again. There you go. All right, we're just going to keep going with that. So I've picked up a bead. I'm going over that next thread bridge over, coming back up through the bead, picking up another bead, going through the next thread bridge over, oops, back up through the bead and pulling my thread tight. And looky here, I got caught on the cactus, so keep that in mind when working with a focal. Your thread might get caught on some of the more interesting shapes. Picking up another bead, going through that last thread bridge. Now this is where you would stop if we were going to end the row on a decrease, but we want to expand the row, end it on an increase. So what we're going to do is we're going to pick up another bead, and we're going to go through that same thread bridge that we just went through, the one that's now kind of covered by a bead. And then we'll go back up through the seed bead we just added. And voila, we're done with our second row, and it has been ended on an increase, just like the start. For this next row, I'm going to start adding my gemstones. So I want to increase the row again, so I'm going to pick up 2 of my gemstones and pass through that first thread bridge. So always pass through the first thread bridge to start your row on an increase. I've chosen rondelle-shaped gemstones to get them to line up a little nicer in the brick stitch, but you still may have to kind of fiddle with them for the first beads you add. And then I come back up through that second gemstone and pull tight. Ooh, that's really pretty. All right, to continue this row, it's much the same like the last row. You just pick up 1 bead, go through the next thread bridge, and pull, pull, pull. Then come back up through the bead you just added. So pretty. Pick up 1 bead, go through the next thread bridge, come back up through the bead. We're moving along with this row, so we're picking up another bead, going through the next thread bridge. And these beads are a little wider than the seed beads we're using, so you may find that like the thread bridge is a little more hidden under the previous bead than when working with more uniform seed beads. but that's okay. The stitch is really easy to kind of modify and adjust where you need. One more bead in this row. Then back up through the seed bead. So pretty. Okay, I'm going to add another increasing row of gemstones. So I've picked up 2 gemstones. I'm going to pass under that first thread bridge in the previous row, kind of tap my beads into place, and then go back up through the second bead. There we go. Continuing the row by picking up 1 gemstone bead, passing under that next thread bridge over, going up through the bead we just added, and pulling our thread tight. Love these turquoise colors. So let's keep going with this row. It's looking so good. Picking up another bead, going through the next thread bridge, going up through the bead, again making sure not to pass back under that thread bridge, pulling tight. Got another bead, going through the next thread bridge, up through the bead you just added, pulling tight. One more. And then we will add 1 more to increase the row. So pretty. Okay, I'm gonna do another row of gemstones in this brick stitch piece, and then I think I'm going to add a picot edge. So I'm gonna start this row again on an increase, picking up 2 seed beads, passing under that first thread bridge, pulling tight. And we're just going to keep going. All right, we've got our 3rd row of gemstones in, and you could keep going with this. You could keep increasing the row. Go back to using those seed beads, increase and decrease the row for a different look. I'm going to stop here, but I'm going to add a picot edge to the end of my brick stitch focal, like I did here, just to add a little, kind of like little edging, just a really cute look to it. So to create a picot edge, I usually use 3 beads in my picot edge. I'm going to pick up a seed bead, I'm going to pick up a gemstone, and then I'm going to pick up another seed bead. Now, my thread is already positioned perfectly. It's coming out of that last bead in the row. All you're going to do is bring your needle down through the next bead over. And when you pull, it creates this cute little, almost like a little lacy edge or frilly edge, and that's what we call the picot edge. So you're just going to do that for the length of the row. So bring your needle back up through the next bead over and repeat. Add a seed bead to your thread, a gemstone, and a seed bead. Come back down through the next bead over. So cute. So we're just going to keep going with that little picot edge. Come back down through the next bead over. So you can have a lot of fun with the Picot edge. You can use different seed bead colors. You can use crystals like I did in my original piece. Little like Rizzo beads or daggers would add a really fun kind of fringy element to the Picot edge. You can get really creative with Picot edge. And this is a technique that you can use on all kinds of different bead weaving designs. You can use it on like peyote stitch, brick stitch, herringbone. There's all kinds of different things you can use it on. So you can see here that my piece has an odd amount of number beads on the last row, and since the Picot edge goes from bead to bead, you need an even row, but I'm going to fix it by just going back and adding another Picot edge here. So it's going to get real fluffy here on the end. So I've picked up my 3 beads and I'm going to go back down through. We're going to see how this looks. Oh, that's kind of fun. Okay, so we'll go back. So it's going to create kind of like a staggered effect. So just keep that in mind. If you just want one layer of Picot edge, it works best with an even amount of beads in your last row. But if you do have an odd amount, you can get creative with it and kind of do this little staggered look, which I'm kind of digging. So let's see how this is going to be fun. Just kind of adds a little more of a fringier look. That's fun. So just keep going with that. That's kind of the cool thing about bead weaving. You kind of just see where it takes you. There we go. So I kind of fixed my Picot edge there. And it looks good on both sides. Yeah, so that's what a Picot edge is. Once you've got your beaded focal all done where you want it to be, you're going to have to finish your thread, and you do that just by weaving it back into your stitch. So I'm going to follow the thread path of my beads and weave it back in. So you want to follow the thread path so your thread doesn't like show skipping over any beads or anything like that. So just kind of loop it around through the thread path a few times, and I'm going to weave it up to the next row here. And how this secures your thread is as you loop your thread through the existing thread path, it's going to catch on those threads that are already within your bead weave. So it's really securing that thread in place the more you pass through and catch those threads. So oftentimes with a tighter stitch like this, you won't have to knot your thread. You can just weave it several times. Of course, you can knot your thread between a few beads if you're more comfortable with that, and then hide the thread in another bead and then trim. But typically with a brick stitch or a peyote stitch, I don't knot my thread because it is secure enough just by looping through a bunch. And I've kind of woven my thread all the way back up to these seed beads. And I've looped around a bunch of times, so I think I'm good there. And then I'm going to trim. And you would do the same for the tail. You can see on my original piece, I also created a little brick stitch up here. So I used the same techniques that I showed you here today to create a little brick stitch top to this piece. So I used 4 beads for the base of my brick stitch, then decreased the stitch to 3, then decreased to 2. And then I just added a bail in between the rows of bead weaving. And then after that, you just slide your leather on, and then I finished with some simple glue and go clasps that you just glue on, or you could use crimp-on clasps as well. So really fun technique. I love brick stitching around frames. You can brick stitch around bigger round beads too. Really a lot of fun ways you can use brick stitch to enhance the pieces that you already have. So I hope that you enjoyed this tutorial today. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope that video was helpful, and I hope you learned a little bit more about brick stitching on frames to create eye-catching statement pieces like the one we created today. I have got a tutorial for this piece in our design studio at artbeads.com. You'll find free instructions and a supplies list for making it there. The link is in the video description. Make sure to leave a like and a comment if you enjoyed this video. We love hearing from you all. And as always, make sure to subscribe so you're the first to know when videos like this one are out. Thank you guys so much, and I will see you next time. Bye!